Greetings and welcome to my channel. This is Sorcerer Tal. You can also find me on Facebook in the Sorcerers Guild. Today on Sorcery in Action, we are going to be doing a tour of my altar. This that you see in front of you now is the shrine to my ancestors. This is my Bubba's clock and my Nanny's Bodvi, or my grandmother and grandfather on my father's side. This crystal garden here, the yellow one, is a shrine to my grandfather on my mother's side. And fortunately, I don't have any other ancestors that need to be given shrine work at this time. Okay, so let's talk about the jar here. As you will recall from a previous video, my yeast minion servitors were created in this jar, but they have been transferred since so that the servitor program in it could have access to a higher form of life. As you can see, there are some guppies in here. If we can find them, there are some shrimps as well. They are all still first generation, but both of these types of shrimp, if you see here, and the guppies are both prolific breeders and easily bred. So as each generation goes on, they too will have the servitor minion placed into their subconscious and into their soul or ka aspect as they grow. And each generation will be influenced by the servitor, creating hopefully the same process as the yeast minion servitors. From there we go over to Santissima Muerta's altar, or grandmother, as I like to call her. Of course, Santissima Muerta actually translates into Most Holy Death. And there she is. These violets are new today for some work that I asked her for. There's her scales. The little Snoopy in the background is just because I like to work with a lot of childlike spirits, so I keep a lot of toys and that sort of things on the altar. There is my scrying mirror. There is a picture of me as a child, and that actually is, I use that to help reach back into my past anytime I am trying to affect that area of my life. This is a rune stave I am working on, and I will be wearing this eventually. It is designed to help me see my effect on things and see my place within the pattern. That's why it's got some of the things that it does. I'll go ahead and show you the back. Excuse me. Yes, there we are. The back. And that shows the creation of a pattern, so that I may see it through the front, through this eye, and I'll actually be making that into a necklace, like I said. Let's continue over this way. There's my owls, one of my totems, and that owl there is actually a messenger spirit that I use for remote viewing. I'll just pick that up later. There's the owl that I give the owl's offerings to. That is a six-eyed clown. He is used when I am trying to work with the Giggler, who is a trickster spirit from the Horde. Here is some of my Fey work. That is actually a fairy figurine and a representation of Kind King Tal's tree. Work over this way a little bit. We have a shrine to Kuan Yin and the fairy house, which we have a video of from the past, if you recall. And my condenser, which is just back over in the corner for now. I use that in summonings to condense smoke. There's the fairy home once again with my sigil on the top, and some milk and honey offerings and some other offerings that have been left for them. So let's go ahead and traverse back over this way. There is some more of my work. This is actually a marionette that I've been working with. And so now we're going to go back down and come down over here. There is where my yeast minions are currently. They are working on some mead that will be ready for the Beltane celebration at the end of this month. When I clear the mead, I will then take some of the yeast that has collected down there in the bottom and use those to start another yeast minion tank. So, let's go over here. That is Luenga. He is a crossroads spirit, similar to Legba, and through him I have been learning a type of magic related to Vudan known as Wenga. There is Zoe. She is one of my golems. She is used as a messenger as well, but what she does is she is used to see magic through the orbs of her eyes, either on my altar or other situations that I ask her about, and then speak to me plainly through her very large mouth. We have some of my crystal garden work here. This is a money spell that is using the crystal formation method, and behind that we have a love spell, but it is not cast on any particular person. Rather, it is used to resonate the feeling of love and just create love and harmony in my life. Behind that, we have some necromancy work I am doing with a crystal ungala, and the thread coming up off of that is to another crystal work which I did a video on. This is one that is involving my personal sigil, and if you'll recall, there is a hagstone in the center of those 3 threads, holding them down in the middle, and as time goes on, it will form crystals on it, just as the other ones have. It is, however, moving much more slowly. There is some crystal formation on the threads there, as you can see, and a little bit down here underneath where the threads have pulled the salt under. Okay, a few more of my creations there. The original Santissima Muerta skull, which is down here, giving her a second aspect to keep an eye on everything I have going on. And now we're going to talk about this Crystal Garden spell, which we hadn't gotten to before, but it is a big part of what I wanted to talk about today. Okay, now as I've mentioned before, my entire altar has its own servitor program, which has actually become linked to the minion program at this point, but that is not what we're actually wanting to talk about. The servitor program moves throughout the entire altar and keeps everything running smoothly, and it is also part of this Crystal Garden project I have going on here. As you can see, there is a hagstone in here, and even though there's a lot of red and blues, it is creating purple throughout the drip system that I have going. So what we do is I fill up some of the water from these tanks, which my servitor is also connected to. And I put in way more than I need to. But we take this water and we are using the life force from it, as well as the servitor that is inherent in the water itself, and we pour it into this one, slightly overfilled, and this is the result. I do this every couple days to move the energy through the altar, which then, to move the energy through this spellwork, which then creates the crystals that work down through my personal sigil and drip into the reflector garden that we have down here, which allows the crystal work to form. And what this is doing, in this case, is actually just moving around the servitor program, allowing it to process and form energy patterns that are conducive to my all-round will, which then create the crystal forms going down into the reflector, and that reflects that energy out onto the altar as a whole and allows the servitor program to continue its effect. So let's go over this way. This side of the altar is much less organized than the rest. You see with the knife here, this is actually a knife that I use for developing frenzy gnosis. We will be discussing that in the sorcery self-defense playlist at some point. You see it has a long thread connected to it, or excuse me, cloth. This is actually to tie the knife to your hand, and it is part of the ritual which allows you to enter into the frenzied state. This here is Mary's doll. It is actually a haunted doll that is connected to a woman that had Down syndrome. Her name was Mary, and she helps me with some aspects of my craft in exchange for me taking good care of her doll. The doll next to it is actually just another doll that I found and Mary took interest in, so we keep that with her as well. I have a large chunk of obsidian that helps to keep the entire work grounded, with 2 sticks in front of it that are ready for a stick breaking. As I said, this part of the altar is much less organized. Part of that is because I do a lot of the actual work here and I'm just kind of messy. And the other part of that is because I like to have some organic chaos in my altar, so that it's not all completely controlled patterns. And this helps just work with the randomness of the universe itself. That there is an old love spell I was working on, or glamour magic. It actually is, in essence, a failed spell, but there was some I did achieve some glamour ability for it, but it didn't achieve its overall purpose. Out here I have a few of the pouches I have been working on lately. The magic chain, as you were already aware of from previous videos. This is a pouch that I made not long ago. It is a pouch to acquire abundance and also health with the amethyst beads. And this is the pouch that I keep the pendulum in that I use for self-hypnosis. I also keep my bone cutter in here. This is used to cut away negative energy when I do healing work. The pendulum is in there as well, as I was already talking about. There's the pendulum, which we use for self-hypnosis. I have some videos on that as well. Okay. So, this video was a bit rambling. I apologize for that. But I wanted you all to have a look at my altar and see what I have going on here. We've got a little bit of client work back in here. It's one of the areas where I store client work that needs to be stored. Up on the top, I have the healing spell from our latest Sorcery in Action video, as well as the bottle egregore. And in the back, we have some spell components that are working on being made. It'll be quite a while before that is ready. Okay. So that will be that for today's episode. Thank you once again for joining us. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please take the opportunity to do so now. And don't forget to join us on Tuesday for another episode of Magical Theory, where we will be going back to our regular filming, and I hopefully won't just keep rambling on like I have been today. Okay, well then. Until then, bright blessings and an interesting fate. This has been Sorcerer Tal.